Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the IceCaps Weekly Wrap. I'm Amy Johnson reporting to you for the AHL Report. Well, the IceCaps were back on the rock last week, kicking off another homestand at Mile One Center, and needless to say, although they played 4 games last week, things did not quite go as Coach Sylvain Lefebvre and the rest of the team probably would have liked. They kicked things off with a Tuesday-Wednesday back-to-back series against the Binghamton Senators, who came to town, and the IceCaps actually dropped both of these games. We'll start with Tuesday night versus the Senators. Things could have gone either way in this game. They ended up losing this one 3-2 in overtime. Ryan Johnston was one of the goal scorers, along with Chris Terry, who scored on the power play, which the power play had been struggling as of late, so it was good to see Chris Terry get a power play goal on that man advantage. And they really kept things tight and managed to get to overtime and managed to get all the way through the overtime period. Almost. It was just in the last 30 seconds that a bad bounce came off of Charlie Lindgren, and unfortunately a Binghamton player was there to bang in that rebound, and they lost in overtime just about 30 seconds before having the opportunity to win it in a shootout potentially. So they took that loss into the next evening, which was Wednesday night when they played the Senators yet again, and this time they lost in regulation. This score for this particular game was 6-4. Had some different contributors for goal scoring for the IceCaps in this one. Yannick Veilleux had a goal, as did Charles Hudon, Stéphane Matteau, and Daniel Carr, who was back from the Montreal Canadiens. But this one, special teams seem to be an issue yet again on the power play and the penalty kill. And the penalty killers were kind of taking a spotlight as discipline seemed to be an issue yet again. There was a revolving door for the penalty boxes, and unfortunately because of that, it just seemed like the penalty killers were getting pretty tired out there because they were on the ice quite a bit. So dropping that series against the Binghamton Senators took them then into Saturday and Sunday against the division-leading Syracuse Crunch, always a very tough matchup for the St. John's IceCaps, and they came back on Saturday night with exactly the kind of comeback win that they needed to have to get things righted and get back to even keel. They won this one handily, 6-1 over the Syracuse Crunch. Chris Terry again had a power play goal. Jakob de la Rose had an outstanding game on this particular night. His play has really gotten more confident of late. He had 2 goals on the evening, and he also had an assist. So he had a 3-point night for Jakob de la Rose. He ended up being the first star on the evening, and he really looked good on this particular night. Stéphane Matteau also had a goal, as did David Brohl and Zach Redmond, and this was an all-around team effort. They really came together, did what they needed to do, and offense had really woken up, and Syracuse didn't really stand a chance. And Charlie Lindgren, especially I should mention, also played very well, keeping the Syracuse players out of the back of the net. Then on Sunday afternoon for a matinee, unfortunately, they weren't able to get a back-to-back win. Syracuse came back kind of with a vengeance on Sunday. Discipline seemed to be an issue yet again. There were a lot of penalties in this one. Chris Terry had 2 more goals, both of which were on the power play. So he had 4 goals last week, all of which were on the man advantage. That also puts Chris Terry at the 20-goal mark for the season. He is the first IceCap to do so in this 2016-17 season. So congratulations to Chris Terry for reaching that 20-goal mark. I'm sure he's going to have plenty more before the season is out. And Charles Hudon scored on the power play as well in that game. So of the 4 games they played last week, unfortunately, St. John's dropped 3 of the 4, came away with 3 points due to the overtime in the first game against the Senators, but they're looking to right the ship, as they say, coming into these last 2 games of this homestand later on this week. But before we get to that, there were some transactions to speak of last week. Michael McCarron was recalled by the Montreal Canadiens to head back to Montreal after the Canadiens had their bye week, as well as Josiah Didier was sent down to Brampton, played 1 game, and then was immediately then recalled back to St. John's after that. And there was a trade that happened just actually this week. Philip Samuelson, defenseman, who has been a healthy scratch for a few games, was traded to Carolina in return for defenseman Keegan Lowe. Philip Samuelson's father, Ulf Samuelson, is actually the head coach for the Charlotte Checkers, where he will be reporting. So we wish Philip Samuelson best of luck, and we say welcome to Keegan Lowe. And taking a look at this week ahead, there will be 2 games on the schedule for the IceCaps. They play 2 games at home at Mile One Center in St. John's, both of which are against the Albany Devils. They happen on Friday and Saturday nights, and both games are at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 p.m. Newfoundland Time. Don't forget to check us out online at ahl.report. for all of our articles and game recaps and previews and video and audio of coaches' interviews, players' interviews, and profiles. And be sure to follow along with us live on Twitter at the AHL Report for every game, where we keep you updated live on what's happening with your St. John's IceCaps. Thanks so much for joining me. Don't forget to tune in next week for another edition of the IceCaps Weekly Wrap. I appreciate you watching. See you next time. I'm Amy Johnson.